left, right.
So what's up? Just want to thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about logical fallacies, which is effectively false logic. You'll see this a lot in the political environment, and you'll see it a lot in kind of commonality. So learn it, listen to it, learn it, and pay attention to it in the future, and you'll be able to spot basically arguments that just don't hold up. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, let's go.
Cheers.
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 But I've got a list of hold on.
All right, well, we're going live, so I'm going to trust your list. Let's just make sure we're good. I'm done redirecting, and it looks like we are live. All right, welcome to episode 67 of SipTalk. Today, we're going to be talking about logical fallacies. My name is Justin DiGiulio. I own and manage a real estate brokerage in Manhattan. Coming at you from the suburbs of New Jersey, we have James, the Boswell Boswell in Charleston, South Carolina. James, professional referee, professional accountant, philosopher, and professional bartender. This is SipTalk, episode 87. James, what are you drinking down there?
A little bit of whiskey and the last of my sour cranberry lime sours from Edmund's Oast, which local brewery in Charleston, and their sour beers are really good.
Nice. I get a nice Corona, so I'm going to go with that. Today we're talking about logical fallacies. So if you don't know what a logical fallacy is, it is basically just false logic. And I think with a lot of what's going on in politics and a lot of coverage the politics are getting, a lot of the politicians just in how they speak in general, I think kind of false logic is something to be able to identify. And this kind of goes in the vein of critical thinking that James and I preach so much. And, in my opinion, critical thinking is kind of the backbone to how I think about life and how I deal with business. So, what do you want to get started with, James? Should we go straight?
And this one's straight out of my wheelhouse because it's a topic that is big in philosophy. And when you watch political debates or political speeches, but especially debates, once you're aware of these, you start catching them all the time. And I would say that I'd say in debates, probably more than 50% of the time when someone's talking, they're committing one or more of these errors.
Yeah, oftentimes a logical fallacy is just someone presenting something as logic, and it just simply does. So, James, could you just kind of give us a textbook definition of what logic is? Logic was one of my favorite. I don't think I had a logic class, but it was one of my. Is it math?
There's basically two components to logic. There's a mathematical approach to it, where it really uses equations and it looks like math and it functions like math, where when this happens and then you have this symbol, it leads to this. And so what you'll do is you'll take down a set of sentences or whatever, turn them into symbols to represent what that sentence represents, and then you can manipulate those to be able to draw a conclusion out of it. And so there's math. I would call that mathematical logic, which.
Sure. But if you have that as a core, you should understand all logic.
Well, yeah, but so that's what's called formal logic. The actual term is formal logic, and it looks a lot like math. And that would be something like modus ponens, which is if P, then Q, P, therefore Q, which basically says if this happens, then this happens. Mm-hmm. This just happened, therefore that will happen. And it gets way more complicated than that. Where you've got like the contrapositive and like anybody who took like a middle school, I guess a high school level math class probably touched on this a little bit.
Not even senior, junior level. This is
it's not super complicated, but at the higher levels it can get insane.
You're adding to it, and it gets more layered.
Yeah, it's like looking at algebra of x plus 2 equals 7, then all right, minus 2 on each side, so we got x equals 5. And then you build on that and you end up with calculus, and you're finding like the area under the curve and all sorts of other stuff. And logic works the same way. So that's formal logic, which I studied a little bit, but that wasn't really where I put my energy in. The other kind of discipline is informal logic. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And that's going to be looking at how is language used to try and construct an argument, and are the arguments that are being made sound, and if not, why? And very often it's because of one of these informal fallacies.
Yeah. So I have a poster that I've known for years. It looks like the date on it I have was 2012, and by Jesse Richardson. So that's something I reference a lot. I kind of keep it on a save file on my computer, so I can just kind of pull it up and just explain to people that like you are actually breaking effectively a formal law. I think a lot of people know this poster I'm talking about. I do want to reference one of the comments we just got from Alex Johnson. Thou shalt not commit logical fallacies. Poster hangs in my office. That's a lot of where we're getting a lot of this from.
Yep.
So I appreciate you referencing that. It is popular, and that's why I think it's a good reference point to start with. So you had some that you had made notes of before. You studied some of this. How did you come across this in school?
I was a philosophy major. I took a class called
So,
Logic.
The intro, I'm not. It may sound like I'm blowing smoke up your ass in this intro, but I truly, professional bartender, professional accountant, professional referee, and philosopher. So did you major? You minor?
Yeah, I majored in philosophy. That was what I studied.
Brilliant. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so this is one of the required classes for the philosophy major, and it was probably my favorite class because it was one of the few classes that had like a direct impact on my ability to do other things. So to jump right into it, we'll probably be talking a lot in both the political realm and the advertising realm here. And the number one fallacy that I'm going to start off with is probably going to be the straw man fallacy. Okay. And it's kind of related to another one that I'll get to called red herring. But the straw man fallacy is where you're going to find a way of intentionally misrepresenting your opponent's case so that it's easier to argue against them. So let's go. I'm going to go with something easy. I'm arguing in favor of reducing the amount that we spend on our military.
Okay. So it says, I'm guessing you're pulling the reference here from the poster.
No, I actually just came up with that off the top of my head. I can come up with a different example if you want.
No, stick with it, because we're, again, in the political realm.
So all right, let's say you're arguing for reducing spending on the military because I need to be the one committing the fallacy. So you're saying we should spend less money on the military, and I'm going to say, oh, so we should leave our nation completely defenseless against any threats?
Okay, fair enough.
Because your argument is we should reduce. I'm taking your argument to be you should be eliminating all military spending. And so that's a lot easier to argue against because no one's going to say we shouldn't have any military. Well, yeah, pretty much nobody, but
yeah. But I think the example they give on this poster, if I was arguing we should put more money into health and education, you would argue that I'm pulling money away from defense.
Yeah. I actually don't think that that's a good example of a straw man, because that's not misrepresenting your argument. That's actually distracting from it, which is more of a red herring. So a red herring is going to be similar to a straw man, but it's one where you're not necessarily misrepresenting what the other person is saying, but you're kind of coming up with a substitute argument for them that actually has nothing to do with what they're talking about. So we were talking about the military, or we were talking about education, and then I bring in military out of nowhere. And you'll see that a lot in political debates where a candidate might be pressed on their record on something, and so they don't want to answer to that for, well, generally obvious reasons. So what they'll do is they'll touch on the subject, say one thing, and then immediately move on to another topic that at best is tangentially related.
Yeah, and that's what there's a lot of reporters that it just drives me nuts when that's almost kind of oozing from the politician's mouth, where they've touched on the question and then completely diverted all the words that are coming out of their mouth are not related to the question at all.
Yeah.
I listen to the BBC in the morning. There's like World Hour or something like that on WNYC, and I noticed that the British reporters tend to press a lot harder, and they'll say things like, "You haven't answered my question," or "But this is what I asked you. You didn't answer this question," and I don't see that a lot in the American media. So
it's been less and less so over the last 5 or 10 years too.
Yeah. So you got straw man and you got red herring.
They're really similar, but the key difference is that straw man is staying kind of within the area that the other person was talking about, and you're trying to warp and shape their argument so that it's easier to argue against.
Mhm.
Whereas a red herring is saying, well, we were playing baseball, now I'm going to go play basketball. Like baseball, like it would be like if we're playing baseball and then I just like put an extra 2 or 3 people on the field and without telling you, and now it's easier for me to win against you because I got more players. And then red herring would be, all right, you showed up wearing metal cleats and gloves and a baseball bat, and here I am wearing basketball shoes and shorts. So like we're playing basketball now. You weren't even prepared for this because it's not what you signed up for.
Right. So you got red herring, you got the straw man. What do you want to hit next?
Huh?
What do you want to hit next?
Ad hominem is another really common one.
That's really, especially in debate too, right?
Yeah, also in debates. And that's going to be attacking the person who is giving the message and not the message itself. And it's super easy to do because anybody's going to have a checkered history. If you don't have a checkered history, I'd like to meet you. But
all right.
And so you can say, well, we shouldn't. Why are we even listening to this person? They did whatever in the past, and they're not a reliable source. And it's easy to do to practically anybody. But the idea, the whole idea behind it is, it doesn't matter who's saying it. Is the argument by itself correct?
Exactly.
And you also see this really heavily in politics, because you can, even somebody from a political party that you disagree with, if they say something that's right, your kind of gut reaction is to say, I don't want to accept it because like the opposing party is saying it. But you have to look at the message and say, is that actually a good idea, regardless of who said it?
Yeah, well, I mean, and yeah, with such division we have right now between the parties, you know, it's really easy. It's easy to attack somebody's character and past history and just completely stonewall them on everything. But ad hominem, definitely a good one. What else do you have?
Another one, this is kind of the opposite of ad hominem, and that's ad populum. And that's going to be, because something is popular, it must be right. The easiest example I can think of is 4 out of 5 dentists recommend whatever. Like, well, why? Like,
why? So again, in the vein of critical thinking, 4 to 5 dentists recommend, rather than say, well, it must be good, say, well, why do the dentists recommend it, and what specifically makes this a better option? I met a lot of dentists as I moved to a handful of different cities. And I met a handful of doctors having moved to a bunch of different cities. A lot of times, I don't think they're the brightest people. And I think they just get caught in a rut of doing the same thing over and over again, that they're probably, very behind the curve when it comes to current knowledge. And they don't exercise a lot of in-depth thinking and problem solving. They just
another thing to consider is, especially in medicine, but probably also in dentistry, you've got people whose sole job it is to go to doctors and get them to recommend certain prescription drugs. And so if I'm a doctor and I'm getting a $50 kickback on every prescription I write for such and such a drug, then I'm probably going to recommend that one more. And so you can look at 9 out of 10 doctors prescribe this in these circumstances or whatever. Well, why is that?
and it's, what is it? It's called ad popular.
Ad Populum. It's super prevalent in advertising. That's probably the number one place that you'll see it. Less so in politics, but to some degree.
But I think you know, if you just recognize that, and you recognize that if a lot of people are doing it, it should mean absolutely nothing to you. You need to exercise critical thinking and just ask yourself, is this a valuable decision to make? Is this a valuable product to buy? Is this correct? Is it factual? You know, just like everybody who stormed the Capitol, you know, it was a popular thing to do in the moment, but now people are on like no-fly lists and they're recognized as domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
And well, you know, all I did was everybody else was
There
doing.
was a great video I saw of one dude who got kicked off of a plane, and it was like kind of, he was choking back tears or whatever. He's like, they wouldn't let me fly on the plane, and then they called me a terrorist, and I don't have the money to get home. I'm just like, dude, you signed up for this.
But so can we just talk about this, because I really tried the other day, the last episode, to kind of run the middle line and say, you know, look, and I still believe that when it comes to what's going on in the country, when it comes to Donald Trump, and it comes to Joe Biden, and it comes to Republicans and Democrats, what a lot of people miss is that you may be a Democrat and you may believe that you're right, but at this point in time, in my thinking, it doesn't matter if you're right and they're wrong. At this point in time, they're your neighbor. So rather than trying to convince them why you're right, or them convince you why they're right, or whatever it is, you have to recognize that you have a lot of differences, and you have to figure out, at this point, Joe Biden is going to be the president. And I'm not a Donald Trump fan, but I don't believe that he belongs in jail. I think a lot of things he's done, probably jail worthy. But if I was Joe Biden and became president, I would say, look, you know, it's over. I don't think we need to make this any bigger of an issue than it already is.
Let's save that question for a separate cast, because I think there's more there than I have the time to address right now.
Sure, but this is what I wanted to say. What got me started. At the end of the day, if anyone in any other country storms the capital of that country and breaks in and beats up the guards, as cooperative or non-cooperative as the guards may be, they're storming in, they're breaking, they're entering. That's terrorism, and what's the word I'm looking for?
Insurrection.
And while you may believe that you're doing the right thing, at the end of the day, there's no way to put the spin on that makes it right. It's just that's just I don't know where the people who were doing that saw it going. They definitely got the point across, but I think they took more, not just back, but
I think there's probably three general groups of people that you can look at as being involved in this. There's the first group that I think were kind of brainwashed into thinking that they were right, and once they actually and then got caught up in the mob mentality, and then once they got inside the Capitol, they didn't really have an idea as to what to do. So, and those are the people that are probably, of all the people to blame, the least blameworthy. The second group of people are similar to the first, but once they got there, saw an opportunity to kind of just cause some havoc or whatever, but still didn't really have much of a plan. There's a third set of people here, and these are the ones that I think are really scary. These are the people that were communicating by radio with each other, that were moving around the Capitol looking for the people that they actually wanted to take. And you can't convince me that they didn't want to take people. There were people that, there's pictures of guys with zip tie handcuffs. They had built a gallows outside the Capitol. So they were looking to capture members of Congress, specifically Pelosi, Schumer, and of all people, Pence. So
so they were going to hang these guys publicly in front of
that. And it's impossible to be able to say how serious they were, but you have to take these people seriously. They were armed. They were wearing military level gear in terms of tactical vests with ballistic plates. They had zip tie handcuffs. There were pipe bombs placed outside both the DNC and the RNC. And I think this subset, and I can't tell you what percentage of the people this was made up of, but this organized subset of true domestic terrorists were using the ruckus that was going on around them as cover to be able to move with deadly purpose.
Yeah, and that's bad shit, and it's bad.
And amazingly, I'm really impressed by the internet's ability to find some of these people when there was very little to go on. But they found like the two pictures I've seen of people carrying the zip tie handcuffs. Both of them have been arrested, and one of them, you couldn't even see his face. You might have been able to see like from here to here in terms, like you could see his eyes, and that was about it. And they were able to find him. So I'm impressed, and I hope that this continues to go on, and that people who committed these crimes face consequences for it, and the people that are responsible for the unnecessary deaths in the Capitol have to reckon for it. But
it's not good. And
oh no,
there's no way to pass it off as a good thing. Let's get back.
To your question about whether or not Donald Trump, what level of consequences Donald Trump should face after he is no longer in office, I think that's something that we need to have a debate on separate from this topic, because there's a lot to go on there.
I'm not willing to really take a side on that, but I definitely think it's a conversation we could get into it, and I'd be happy. We'd probably hold similar sides on that. But,
real quick, since we got derailed, we got any comments or anything to address before we move on?
Let's stick with this, because we just got. I'll get back to the comments. I want to do some shout outs to some of the guys that are on live.
Okay. Well, then I'll keep on plowing through these. Another one that's also super common in the political world is the slippery slope argument, which is A will lead to B, which will therefore at some point lead to Z, and Z is going to be some ridiculous circumstance that everyone agrees that we don't want to have happen. But basically, A leads to B, therefore A leads to Z. Well, no.
It's not, the correlation may not be
there. The best example I can come up with here was, and still relates to, gay marriage, where if we let two men or two women marry, then what's to stop someone from marrying two or three people, or marrying their horse or a car or something? And you say, well, that's not what the argument's about. The argument is it fair that two men or two women can get married, and we stop there? That's all we're asking for. And is it fair to those people, and is it fair to society to allow that? And then people would misconstrue that to say, well, it leads to these other things, therefore we can't allow this to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And slippery slope, I think you got to call that one. You got to call that one early on, before you get too far down the slope.
And the thing is, slippery slope can also be.
The reason I'm saying is because the further down the slope you get, the more tantalizing it becomes, and you just got to call it before you get to that more tantalizing part, because that's the easy sell.
Well, and the thing is, like with slippery slope, it can be a valid argument technique if you stay reasonable. It's when you use it to misconstrue or exacerbate or exaggerate a point. So if you say, well, if we do this, it'll lead to that, like one step. And if you can say, like, yeah, this is what happens when you do that, and they say that's a bad idea, you're probably okay. But if you have to go 3 or 4 things down the line, say this leads to that, to that, to that, to that, and then you're arguing against all the way out here, that's where you're really committing the fallacy. So it's one of those ones where it's not a hard rule. All right, I got like 2 or 3 more.
All right, cool.
So tu quoque, and I couple that with also like whataboutism. So tu quoque is basically, you say that we should do this, but you don't always do it.
Okay.
So
give me a good example.
Well, you say that I should never cheat on my girlfriend, but you cheated on a girlfriend in the past, so why should I listen to what you're saying?
This is hypothetical, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the argument is it okay to cheat on a girlfriend? The answer is no. But you're saying, well, you cheated on your girlfriend in the past, so why should I listen to your argument about not cheating on my girlfriend?
So redefine. I think you used an example, but what would we need a better definition to?
So the definition is kind of saying that it's similar to ad hominem, where the messenger is being attacked because they haven't always acted in accordance with whatever argument they're trying to make.
Mhm.
But that's not attacking their argument. Their argument is fine. They just haven't always obeyed it themselves. But you don't have to have obeyed the rule that you're coming up with for the rule to be good or bad.
Again, critical thinking. When you have a parent that says, "Don't smoke," but that parent smokes, your father ever told you not to smoke?
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah, your father still smokes.
I know my mom did. Like, my mom quit smoking. But yeah, that's a great example, actually, is like a parent that smokes telling their kid not to smoke. The parent's right.
Yeah.
It's just they're not the best messenger for it, but that doesn't mean that their argument is wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I like the smoking one. All right.
And so going along with the parent thing is like whataboutism. So that's going to be, well, what about all the other people that get to do it? So if my kid and I want to go out and I'm in high school and I want to stay out until 1:00 in the morning, and my parents say, no, you have to be back home by 11. Like, well, what about Justin? His mom lets him stay out until 1 or 2, and she doesn't care. What about him? Why can't I do it? And again, it's not arguing about whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's saying, well, what about these other people that do it?
Yeah. It's, again, thinking.
Yeah, but you see that a lot in the political sphere.
Well, give me an example of the political sphere, because that's not where my mind initially went at all.
Anytime that you've seen Trump get criticized or whatever, he oftentimes will say, well, what about the Democrats when they do this? Why aren't we talking about that?
Okay, yeah, fair enough. All right. Okay, do you have any more?
Yeah, I got a few more. This one, I like it just because the Latin phrase for it's really fun to say. It's called begging the question, but I always like calling it petitio principii because it sounds fun.
The T, spell it?
Petitio, so like petition, but take off the N. Petitio principii.
Principii, okay.
And so that is basically when you use your conclusion as one of the premises in your argument to prove your conclusion. You see this very often in religion, where, well, God says that we should do this. Well, why should we do this? Because God says so. So it's circular.
Yeah. Okay. Give me a better example on this one. I'm not. I see it there, but I need something else to make it sink in.
Trying to think about like this one's a little bit harder to come up with an example off the top of my head that's original. But it would be, I'm trying to think about like in the world of education. I think you see it a good bit. Come back to me on this one.
I'm not gonna remember this moving forward.
I will.
No,
I got like 2 more.
Okay.
Gambler's fallacy is another really good one. So let's say we're flipping coins, and I flipped the coin 4.
Is a really good one, because I think naturally your brain follows this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we're playing a game, whoever calls the coin flip right wins $1. Mm-hmm. And so we've just flipped the coin and it's come up tails 4 times in a row. And so you're like, hey, I want to put can we bet $5 in this one? I'm betting $5 on heads this time.
Yeah, because it couldn't possibly go tails again.
Right. But each individual flip is 50-50. Previous results don't have any effect whatsoever.
Because obviously you could have just as compelling of an argument that it's going to be tails again because you're on a roll.
Well, that's also the gambler's fallacy. Yeah. The idea of being on a roll.
Yeah, is it exactly. When the odds of something are 50-50.
Right. And you see this a lot. Like actually in casinos, if you ever played roulette, they'll have a board up that'll show the last 20 or 30 results. And it'll show red, black, and the number or whatever. And people look at that to decide where they want to place their bet next. So if it's been black 5 times in a row, everyone's going to be putting money on red or whatever, because there's no way it could be 6 times in a row black. But like the odds are the same. And the thing is, you can actually, and it's basically misconstruing how probability works. Because if you were to say, what are the odds that black comes up 6 times in a row? Well, that's going to be 1 out of 64. But when you get to 5 times in a row black, which is 1 out of 32, the odds that it comes up black again are not 1 out of 64. The odds are 50-50. It's only when you aggregate all those together and you have to basically bet on the basket of results that you can use that probability. But when you get to that individual event, the probability is what it is.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, I mean, there's no way, you know, critical thinking, there's no way around your odds being 50-50.
Yeah, all right, last one.
Okay.
Is false dichotomy, which on the chart is black or white, but I like false dichotomy better, which is it's either this or that. And usually it'll be picking between one somewhat palatable option and one really unpalatable option and say, hey, look, we can either have this or we can have that. And you're ignoring that there are other options available. And you're trying to reduce an argument down to a choice between 2 things, and you try and make the choice as easy as possible that people end up on your side.
Yeah, when there may be other options available, but say there's 2 options, this is it, one of them sucks, so obviously here's a clear choice. When there may very well be other options.
An easy example would be like we're picking a restaurant to go out to eat, and I don't eat seafood. So you're like, all right, there's this great sushi place that I want to go to. I'm like, I don't really want to go to sushi. Well, it's like, and then you say, well, it's either sushi or we go to McDonald's. I'm like, well, no, there's other restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably more willing to take McDonald's.
Oh, I totally would.
All right. All right. So I have false cause on my next one on the list here. Presuming a real or perceived relationship between things means that one is the cause of the other. Why do you pull up the email I sent you?
I've got the chart up.
All right, cool. So presuming that there's a real or perceived relationship between 2 things, one is causing the other. And you know, everybody knows that just because 2 things maybe, not everything is related. I don't know. Can you elaborate on that? I think that was very
false cause.
Yeah, or maybe come up with a good example. Especially if we could come up with the political realm,
so
the environmental realm.
This is all right. So the biggest, I would say, the biggest area that you see this is actually in conspiracy theories.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So
because you can look at an event and you've got this isolated event that happened, and there's probably a whole bunch of causes as to why it happened. But let's say this thing happened twice, right? And both times something other random happened to happen those 2 times. You say, well, that happened, therefore this. So you also see it a lot in sports, actually, where like superstitions, false cause is basically, superstitions are false cause. So I every time that I've worn my worn out Yankees hat, the Yankees won. Therefore, when I wear this Yankees hat, the Yankees will win. No, not a single person on the Yankees knows that I even own that hat.
It's completely unrelated.
But but you also see it with conspiracies where something happened and they draw a conclusion and they say, well, this must have caused it. And it's super easy to do because all you need is 2 things that happen and you just say, well, now they're related. Now I've committed false cause.
Okay.
But yeah, I think superstition is probably the easiest way to think about it.
Let's hit loaded question. And that's asking a question that has an assumption built into it, which is obviously
okay. I've got one.
Assumption built into it that is unlikely to be true. But either way, it's a loaded question. Assumption involved.
Justin, when did you stop beating your girlfriend?
Exactly, and that's a question that never hit anyone before. But the question itself, you're really painting me in bad shape here, June. But the question itself has an implied answer.
Right.
Whether it's
The implication
false.
is that you've been beating your girlfriend at some point and you stopped, whereas you've never done it. But the question says you have.
Exactly. And then we have bandwagon, which you called ad
Populum.
populum.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I feel like there's got to be a better way to describe this. Begging the question, a circular argument in which the conclusion is included in the premise. Okay, so that was the one that you gave that on God, right?
Yeah. So I most often think about it when people are making arguments based on religion, where, for example, like thou shalt not steal, and so, well, why shouldn't we steal? Well, because God says so. Well, like, well, how do we know that God exists? Because how do we know that God exists? Because I read the Bible. Well, how do we know that the Bible is true? Because God wrote it. But the Bible says that God exists, and God wrote the Bible. So
it's a circular argument.
Yeah, I think I need to break this down a little bit more because for those who, well, hold on. So in the world of argument, it's conclusions have to exist separate from the premises. The premises are the set of facts or circumstances that you use to build your case to get to a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to have a proper argument or a proper debate, first of all, both parties have to agree on what the premises are. If you can't agree on the premises, then you don't have an argument, because your argument now has to go back a step, because now we need to argue about how we get the premises set. And so you have to basically back up and you've got another set of premises.
Well, anyone who's good at arguing understands that you have to take small steps together. And if you're not making those steps together, because whatever you're laying down just doesn't have any foundation to it.
And that's what I'm talking about in terms of agreeing to the premises. Is we're taking small steps together of like, okay, can you agree on this? Okay, cool. Can you agree on this?
You have to agree on the playing field.
Right. So those are your premises.
Yeah.
And then the conclusion is something that you're going to draw out of those premises. So you can't have the conclusion in the premises of like God exists is the conclusion that I'm trying to reach. And if I use the premises are the Bible, which the Bible tells us that God exists, well, no, because the conclusion is in the premises because the Bible says that God exists. That's not something that supports the conclusion. That is the conclusion.
Okay, so let's hit the next one. Appeal to authority, using the opinion or position of an authority figure in place of an actual argument. Let's see.
You see this a lot of times when someone has a position of authority or is an expert in one field, but is talking about something outside of their field.
Exactly.
You can have someone who's really, really intelligent, but if it's not something that they have researched or worked on, they can be very wrong.
Yeah, very much so. A lot of that, and again, that's your scientists who are religious, or your doctors.
Like here's for some reason this is here's something that comes to mind is about 2 months ago, there was a case of a guy who worked for the New Yorker, the magazine. They were doing a Zoom call, and during the Zoom call, he like exposes himself on the camera, and I think he might have been like masturbating while he was on the call. And so the New Yorker fired him, which makes sense. And then shortly afterwards, Malcolm Gladwell came out and kind of criticized the decision. Now, Malcolm Gladwell's an expert in a lot of things, and he's a smart guy. And he talked about how he thought that it was kind of a rush to judgment and firing this guy, and talked about how like society punishes masturbation and all this other stuff. Whereas, and so thankfully not too many people bought into this. But
Malcolm Gladwell is an authority in many things,
but not on this. And also, this was also kind of an equivocation thing, which is another one of the fallacies, actually, which is using kind of unclear terms, so that way you can kind of pick and choose their meaning as the argument evolves. And so Malcolm Gladwell basically said, well, like, you know what, this society is a little bit puritanical about the way that we treat masturbation or whatever. And it's a little bit unfair to fire this guy over masturbating, ignoring the fact that like this was done on a Zoom call in a professional environment, not like because of what he was doing in private and somebody just happened to hear about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you look in appeal to authority and say, well, Malcolm Gladwell says that they shouldn't have fired him. He's an authority. He's got background in psychology and all this other stuff. Well, sure, but he's wrong here.
All right. So just if you guys have joined us recently on live, we're talking about logical fallacies or false logic, not about masturbation. Maybe a little bit about masturbation, but that's just kind of one of the examples James has chosen to use. But this, if you're not really into this stuff, or if you're probably a bad arguer, or not someone who invokes a lot of logic or critical thinking, this may not be interesting to you. But if you're interested in learning more, stay tuned. We're going to keep hitting it. I'm going to run through and say hi to some people and read through some comments. Mostly read through the comments. We got Letty saying, I need a drink. Yes, you do, Sarah.
Yes, you do.
I have that in my job as an educator. We got a lot of joins here on TikTok, but a lot of people popping out, I think, because it's probably pretty boring if it's not something you're interested in. TikTok was also, we got the guy's got this entire logical fallacy poster on the wall in his office. All right, we have Eugenia in Argentina drinking red wine and doing her best to keep up with her English. Eugenia, thank you for joining us. Glad you're drinking red wine. I was going to grab some white wine. I couldn't find any. How do you think things are going to be next week? We can maybe get into that in there. Debbie says hello. Let's see, Lisa. Hi, Lisa. We got Ratch the Rampage. Hi, Wanda. Em is asking what the topic is tonight. We got Ashley Demers here. We got a bunch of people here.
Ashley Demers from Tamarack High School.
Tamarack High School, yeah. So,
wow.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of people that have kind of popped in and popped out. But it's kind of nice to see who's on. So thank you guys for joining us. Again, this is kind of a dorky topic. It's a little dry if you're not into it. But I think if you can recognize, so we're just bringing these to your attention, this false logic. And I think in the future, if you listen to kind of these different cases of false logic, it may help you recognize when someone in the future is using false logic. And I'll tell you in a really fucked up way, I recognize myself when I'm using false logic. And then I just kind of, and a lot of times I'll just double down on it because a lot of people, it appeals to a lot of people. I guess it's maybe the easy way out in a lot of cases, but listen to the stuff, learn it, so nobody gets over on you, and then challenge someone when they use this false logic on you, so you can have a more in-depth conversation, and you can get to really what is the root for the reason people are saying these things. And it's going to help you have better conversations. It's going to help you understand people better, and it's going to help build better relationships. And again, our political, the political landscape right now, the political relations are a disaster. And a lot of it is because of all these logical fallacies you hear in every single debate. A lot, we're just allowing them to happen. Nobody's asking questions. And the dumbest people are being convinced one way or the other.
If I were teaching a philosophy class and we were doing informal fallacies or whatever, I would probably have like homework assignments, maybe once a month or whatever, where they'd have to watch a political debate and pull out 3 or 4 different examples from each debate. Like, watch the entire debate, give me 3 or 4 examples, and explain why.
I think that's brilliant. I'm going to hit the next one in the middle here of the logical fallacies chart. The appeal to nature, make the argument that because something's natural, it must be valid or okay to do.
Yeah, do you buy organic meat?
Well, let's go back to your Malcolm Gladwell argument.
Oh yeah, I got. All right.
Yeah, masturbation should be allowed because it's a natural thing, except you're ignoring the fact that it was on camera in front of the company. But yeah, I
Yeah,
see.
there's really very few fields where that's okay or encouraged.
But I see. Yeah, exactly. But I see that oftentimes used when people are using drugs. And they're like, "This is all natural, man."
The pots.
Yeah, exactly. However, it's so is tobacco. Smoking anything and inhaling it.
So is alcohol, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are naturally occurring that just because it's from nature doesn't make it good for you. There's a ton of food that has a lot of sugar in it. Foods with a high glycemic index, full of sugar. The most common sugar that we consume,
Fructose.
comes from fruit.
Yep.
Eating grapes is probably better for you than eating a fucking Twinkie. But at the end of the day, sugar is sugar. So, and calories are calories. It's just how how you burn them and how many you consume and.
Yeah, and you can also look at kind of the inverse of nature, where anything that is synthetic or artificially created must be bad for you.
Yeah, just because, and and that's a very good argument because, Nicole, who joined us in the previous podcast, she was bashing GMO food. She was kind of resharing a topic, and I sent a message. I don't know if I don't check my messages often as I should, but I was just like, remind me again, why is GMO bad? And we didn't start that. We didn't open that can of worms. But,
thankfully, we would have gotten way off track.
but yeah, GMO isn't something that really worries me, just because I think that's.
Well, I think it's one of those ones where you have to look at it in more detail, where there might be certain GMO foods that are worrying. There might be some that are perfectly safe. But saying all of them are bad because it's not natural is fallacious. Just the same thing if everything is good because it is natural. Like you can't you can't be overly broad.
Yeah.
That kind of brings us to the next one, which is composition and division, which is
Okay.
somewhat related.
I'll let you read that. Go for that one.
So composition and division basically means if you've got something that's true of a part, it has to be true of the entire thing. And then division is the opposite, where if it's true of the entire thing, then it has to be true of a part.
Well, and that's why the appeal to nature doesn't work, because just because one thing in nature may be good for you doesn't mean everything that's natural.
Yeah, that's why I said it kind of leads in naturally. I would use an example from government, where if you let's say you've got a buddy that works for government, or let's say somebody who works for government who's just dumb, and you say, oh, I mean, that person who works in government is like, I've seen bricks that are more intelligent, therefore everybody in government must be dumb. Well, what's true of a part isn't true of the whole.
Yeah.
And you could also look at someone who works for government and be like, all right, so government is just incompetent and screws up everything and is inefficient or whatever. So anybody that works for government must be lazy and incompetent too. Well, no, not necessarily.
You got to dig a little deeper and get a little more specific. And
so that's my example on composition and division.
Yeah. All right.
Or like all cops are pigs. Well, no.
Yes, and again, that goes back to logic. Just because some cops are pigs doesn't mean all cops are pigs. And obviously across the spectrum of different careers. Anecdotal, using personal experience or an isolated example instead of a valid argument, especially to dismiss statistics.
You see this in politics all the time.
Yeah.
How many times do the politicians say, I had this constituent call me and they told me about, Trump does it all the time. I had this person call me up and tell me that this happened and I've had the best year ever or whatever. Well, that's one person. That's one story. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't, there's many, it's a very small fraction. There's the example they're giving on the chart is Jason said, his grandfather smoked 30 cigarettes a day and lived to 97. Therefore, cigarettes probably aren't causing cancer.
I got one more that's not on here, but I feel like, especially in our circumstances right now, really needs to be put out there.
All right, good.
Argument by repetition.
Okay. And that's just what wearing people down. And when you're talking, I'm guessing you're talking about voter fraud.
I am.
Okay.
Where if you repeat something enough, you can start to convince people that it's true because they hear it all the time. But that doesn't mean that it's true. It just means you've said it a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. You want to hit the next one?
Appeal to emotion?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be just trying to manipulate someone into feeling a certain way to get them to either agree or disagree with the conclusion, whether or not the conclusion's actually right. And so I think an easy example here would be the death penalty, where you could, if I were to argue, I'm going to argue against the death penalty and say that I don't think it's right for the government to be killing people. And then the argument that like an appeal to emotion against me would be, well, think about how the victims must feel to not have like the person that murdered their loved one meet justice. That's an appeal to emotion, of the emotion for vengeance.
Yeah.
But that's not actually talking about whether or not death penalty is a good idea. That's an emotional response to the death penalty.
Yeah. I think that's, it's just appealing to emotion and circumnavigating logic. Did you say tu quo q? Was that one?
Tu quoque. Yeah, and that's going to be, well, you're saying that we should do this, but you yourself don't always do it. So why should we listen? Well, why should we always do something if you don't always do it?
Fair enough. And then we got burden of proof, saying the burden of proof lies in the person making the claim, not in the person making the claim, but in the person that's basically being accused. I mean, I think that's kind of how our court system works, right?
This one's a little bit harder to kind of give an example. I don't really like the example that they have. Well, the example that they have on there I feel is good, but it doesn't really capture the essence of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, you mean like in?
Well, so here, instead of using their definition, I would say it's making a claim that is difficult or impossible to prove or disprove, specifically disprove.
Because someone can't,
because you can't prove me wrong, it must therefore be right. And that's not how it works. So I could say aliens are watching us right now. And you'd say, well, I don't see any evidence of that. Like, well, prove me wrong. Prove to me that aliens aren't watching us right now.
All right. You want to hit the Scotsman?
I actually don't know this one. Oh, this one, this is kind of shifting the goalposts is, I think, a better way of describing it.
Is that this one? Or was that, I thought there was another one that covered shifting the goal, special pleading?
Special pleading. Well, all right. So the No True Scotsman one, the classic example is like no true Scotsman would pour half and half in their coffee. They drink it black. Well, my grandfather is from Scotland and he drinks his coffee with half and half. And you say, yeah, well, no true Scotsman would. That's the basic idea of it, is saying, well, that example doesn't work because they're not a pure example of this.
Okay,
but
yeah.
So it's a general to specific, where you're trying to make a general claim, and then when you get to specific, you say, well, no, that doesn't fit the general or whatever. It's not a commonly used one, but I think it's kind of, I think you can lump it in with moving the goalposts.
Yeah.
But actually, you know what? You see this a lot in politics too. More on the Republican side, but also the Democratic side, which is, well, no Republican would ever support raising taxes on their constituents. Well, Mitt Romney raised taxes on his constituents in Massachusetts through healthcare. Well, he's not a true Republican then.
True Republican. Yeah, exactly. Fair enough. The Texas sharpshooter, cherry picking data clusters to suit an argument or finding a pattern to fit a presumption.
Yeah, so that's going to be more like kind of, I call that like either cherry or nut picking, where cherry picking is you're going to find only the data that supports your claim and ignore all the other data, whether or not it's if you've got 100 examples and 3 support you, then you can be like, I'm going to pick these 3 and then maybe one of the other ones. Whereas it's really 97-3, but you make it look like it's 3-1. And then nut picking is basically the exact opposite, but picking the only cases that disprove something.
Mm.
So again, if it's 97 times out of 100 it works and 3 times it fails, I'd be like, all right, yeah, like here 3 times it failed and like here 5 times it worked, so it's not as good as they say, but I'm ignoring the other 92 times. And this is where sometimes nut picking be okay, because let's say there's a medicine and 97% of the times it makes you feel better and 3% of the time you die. Well,
Okay.
maybe those nuts are worth picking because you say, like, the benefit of the medicine is not outweighed by the fact that there's a 3% risk that you could die. And I think about it whenever I listen to those ads for prescription drugs or whatever, where it'd be like, you ever wake up tired in the morning? You're like, okay. And then at the end, of like, side effects may include nausea, diarrhea, seizures, internal bleeding, and fatigue.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but they get. I think you got to up that a little bit, like erectile dysfunction, paralysis.
Yeah.
Like, and then you're like, all right. It's.
But I love the ones where they list one of the side effects as like one of the things that they're actually trying to cure. So like, do you ever wake up tired in the morning? And side effects may include morning fatigue.
Mm. All right, we got 5 left. Let's try to speed through these. I don't know how exactly we're doing for timing. We're coming up in the hour mark, so we like to wrap it at the hour. All right, you want to hit the next one?
The fallacy. I haven't really heard of this one before, but I think it's basically going to try and exaggerate any flaws in an argument to make it seem like the argument is weaker than it actually is. Just because your argument isn't perfect doesn't mean that it isn't strong. And so it's like if I take a driver's test and I don't know, let's say I score any test whatsoever and I score a 97 out of 100. And you'd be like, well, you must not know what you're talking about because you missed 3 questions on the test. Well, I still got a 97. That's a pretty good score.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Personal incredulity. That's not a word that I use often. But it's saying that because someone finds something difficult to understand, it must not be true.
Here's a good example of that. In the early 1900s, we believed that there was just one galaxy, the Milky Way. Mm-hmm. This was the accepted scientific consensus, is this is the only galaxy, here we are. Okay. And then Hubble started doing some work and observed a whole bunch of other galaxies. He's like, look, all those things that we thought were stars, those are galaxies. And that was really difficult for people to believe, and some people rejected it entirely. But because now we were already small before, and we're that much smaller.
Yeah, it's very difficult to comprehend that there's that much. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, and we could even draw this back to, like, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. Then we found out that it was the sun that was the center of the universe. Then we found out that the sun was just like in this galaxy or whatever. So each one of those steps, people had harder and harder time accepting it, not because it was or wasn't true, but because it was difficult to conceive of us being that small. And I'm pretty sure that gave some problems to Galileo later on in life.
Yeah, the life of astronomers back then was not a good one. You're fighting religion a lot.
Religion and politics are where you see these a lot. Ambiguity is the next one. I call this one equivocation. And that's going to be where you use a term that can have multiple meanings, and then you don't specify what type of meaning you're using. And then later on, as you build your case, you use a different meaning of it. So here's an easy example, is you say, man is fundamentally good at heart. Jill is a woman, so she can't be good.
I like the example on the chart. I like that. Fair enough. But I like the example on the chart.
Oh yeah, that's actually a good example. I like it.
So when the judge asked the defendant why he hadn't paid his parking fines. He said he shouldn't have to pay them because the sign said "fine for parking," and he assumed that parking was fine.
Yeah.
That is a good one. And I think people use that very often when, and the counter argument to ambiguity is logic.
Well, it's just you have to. This is going back to you need to define your terms. Is you need to say when I say this, like in the world of philosophy, very often in the first couple pages of a philosophical paper, or like even in like a philosophy journal for academic philosophy, the authors will go about and kind of define their terms, and they say when I use this word, I mean this, not anything else, just this.
Yeah. You want to hit the next one?
Genetic, which is judging something good or bad on the basis of where it comes from or from who it comes from. So this is going to be kind of related to ad hominem a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, again, politics, where like if the Democrats come up with a policy proposal, then you're going to say, well, I'm not going to even listen to this policy proposal because the Democrats just have an agenda. Or the same thing for the Republicans. The Republicans come up with something, and it could be a good idea. It could be something that actually helps people. But you say, well, all the Republicans have done is just increase the deficit or whatever. So I don't want to see anything that they propose for legislation. But you're not actually looking at legislation. You're looking at where did it come from. So I consider that to be really similar to ad hominem.
But again, critical thinking. You need to actually see what's on the table rather than look at who served it and ad hominem.
I consider genetic to be almost the exact same as ad hominem.
It really sounds like it. All right, and then it's the last one. This is middle ground, saying that a compromise or the middle point between the two extremes must be the truth.
This is really close to the false dichotomy.
It's a spin off of it, I feel.
Yes.
Like. The false dichotomy is saying you either like chicken wings or you like pizza.
So this is kind of the next step from the false dichotomy, where what you do is like if you're committing a true false dichotomy, it's here's my option, which I think is good, and then here's your option, which is just terrible. So we can only pick these two. The middle ground is here's two terrible options, and my option's also bad, but I'm going to make it sound better by coming up with two worse options and then coming in the middle, whereas the truth isn't in the middle.
Well, I mean, it could be, but likely, but again, it has nothing to do with where it falls on, on the.
Yeah, but it's going to say we should always find compromise here, and sometimes there just isn't compromise. Be like, I say 2 + 2 is 4, and you say, well, I think 2 + 2 is 7. So let's just agree that 2 + 2 is 5.5.
Yeah, good. You know what? I'm on the same page as you. I think we should, because otherwise we weren't going to come to an agreement here. And that must be the case.
I actually see that a lot with in my accounting work, where I'll come up with an answer like, here's your net income, here's the amount of tax that you owe or whatever, and they're like, well, is there anything that we can do to like change these numbers or whatever? Like, I don't want to pay that much in tax. Like, no, this is your income. Like, well, can't we just like change things a little bit so that I owe a little bit less? No.
Fair enough. Let's not bring accounting into this one.
It's just an easy example for me to come up with.
No, it definitely is. Anything else you think that we missed? Anybody have any questions about logical fallacies or false logic? Who's watching live, or wants to add an example before we tune out?
I'll close on this and just say that when you're listening to people making arguments or whatever, try and be able to pull out the actual conclusion that they're trying to reach and how they're trying to build to it. And if you do that, you'll start to realize all the ways that people kind of just deviate from the path. And I would say next time you listen to a political speech, a political debate, anybody talk whatsoever, try and look for like the straw man, the red herring, and the like the ad hominem and the ad populum. Those are like the four that you'll see the most.
The biggest ones, yeah. But that's good, yeah.
And if you guys have any examples or whatever, send us some messages in the chat. We'll talk about them on the next cast or whatever, because there's always good ones out there.
All right, cool. So this has been episode 67 of SipTalk, a drunken production. Thank you for joining us.
All right, that concludes today's lesson on false logic, logical fallacies. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have not already, please subscribe, like this video, like this podcast, and if you don't mind so much, share it. Thank you.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.